I've had Mario Kart on the brain a lot over the last year. A couple months back I talked about Mario Kart Wii and ranked its stellar track selection list. And that was some of the most fun I've ever had making a video, so sure, I'll do another one, why not? The next best option after the main one I played during my childhood would be to tackle one of the other ones I played the most. I don't have 8 Deluxe right now and don't plan to until the booster course pass is done, and no one's gonna care about a coverage of the base Wii U version, so I guess DS it is. Someone asked me to ask why Rob is in this game, so yeah, why was he? I only just recently watched the Scott the Wasp Mario Kart videos, so now I finally understand the context on that, but there you go, I hope you're happy. This game holds a very special place in my heart. I might have made more memories with family through Wii and 8, but I got this game and my original DS on the same day that my brother was born, so this is a special day associated with it that the others don't. I hadn't played this one in a while before I decided to start making this video, and I was looking forward to getting back into it after so long. And my main takeaway is, oh my god, how did I ever play this alongside the Wii version? Like, it's a good game, great even, but how can I enjoy this? There's no trick system. The entire experience is the equivalent of anticipating a sneeze that never happens. I exaggerate of course, but I do prefer Wii by a fair margin. That is to be expected though. Wii did have a more powerful console to run more ambitious tracks on, as well as a much wider selection of retros to pull from. I already think it made a few questionable choices in that department, but the key word there is questionable choices. With DS, it is painfully clear how slim the pickings were, and they really weigh down the overall quality of the roster, which is such a shame given how great the Nitro lineup here is. The SNES and GBA tracks are about what you'd expect, but the Double Dash picks especially clearly suffered going to a handheld system from a home console. Everything DS could have picked from there is either boring as shit, or would have likely been more than what the system could handle. One of them even manages the seemingly impossible balancing act of doing both. I'll discuss those as they come up though. Same guidelines apply for this as the previous Mario Kart video. Objective analysis takes a complete backseat to how fun I find the tracks to race on, music and aesthetic can play a big role in the rankings, and to a lesser extent so can the placement in the track selection list. I'm not even going to play around this one beforehand, why is Mario Circuit in the Star Cup? Footage sources will be linked in the description as always because I don't have a capture card. Now that's enough for the intro, let's get into things. Already off to a great start because I actually need an F tier this time. I had SNES Choco Island 2 a spot ahead initially, but the more times I replay this, the more I can't stand it. Now, I've heard people say this track looks hideous, and I don't entirely agree with that. Sure, the main color scheme's a little boring, but it's not ugly. Then you remember it's a SNES track and see all the bright red, blue, green and yellow bricks on the outskirts that clash horribly and only serve to be an eyesore. If it was just an ugly course, then that's one thing, but oh my god, racing on this one's obnoxious between the slippery mud and the ramps that take up the majority of the path, some of which practically force you onto the off-road. It is not a fun experience. The music is pleasant at the very least, and I kinda like that the Piranha Plant heads act as hazards. Besides that, this is terrible and drags down the otherwise really good Lightning Cup. Now, I haven't played more than one round of Double Dash in my life, so I can't exactly comment on how good the tracks in it are, but when it comes to Baby Park, I'm aware that it's very divisive. The people that hate it think the basic oval shape is incredibly dull and uninteresting, but the people that love it are in it for the chaos. The course is tiny and simple, but the huge special items, fast and slippery nature of the game, and cramped course layout make it more about causing as much mayhem as possible. It runs for 7 laps instead of the usual 3 to make the race last longer than the yawn that half the people playing will inevitably be doing, so players will always be in close proximity to each other. If you take that away, if you reduce the lap count, take out all the huge chaotic items, make the controls far less slippery, and remove some of the cool background scenery for good measure, you no longer have Baby Park. What you're left with is a boring oval with music that, while fun, whimsical, and potentially maddening in a vacuum, no longer fits the tone the race is going to have. Do I need to say any more? Look, I like to think I'm pretty lenient on the circuit tracks. I understand that they're meant to ease new players into the game. Hell, I put the starting circuits in Wii around the middle of the pack there, because they fulfill their purposes well enough and I don't expect anything crazy from them. That said, I at least expect something. Literally one element of creativity in the layout or theming. Wii showed off the trick system and taught the player to keep an eye out for potential alternate paths. 7 and 8 introduced the gliding and anti-gravity gimmicks. Double Dash and 64 had different scenery and played around with their layout layouts a little bit. Even the sprite games have actual hazards and off-road shortcuts. Figure 8 circuit has nothing. It is nothing. It's kind of telling that it's the only circuit track to not at least be themed after a character. It is the most basic ass boring figure 8 with the most plain racetrack aesthetic ever, and 2 long straightaways so you either get to do nothing for an extended period of time, or practice snaking. Neither of those options is fun. Even the goddamn super circuit tracks have more going for them than this, and they were from 2 games ago, also on a handheld console. The only part of this track I like besides the decent music is the tunnel under a different part of the track, but even that's less visually interesting than the pipe in N64 Mario Raceway. I give up, man, let's just move on to the next one. I put SNES Koopa Beach 2 in C tier at first, because it seemed perfectly inoffensive and bland. But the more I played on this one, the less I liked it, to the point where I couldn't justify to myself putting it above that other sand track. Outside of the admittedly neat part with the deep water spots, this is literally just a circle with nothing else going on. There's off-road and a tide, but they both feel like complete non-factors. There's nothing interesting to look at, the SNES trademark blocks look out of place once again, it's covered in sand which I already inherently have a bias against because something coarse, rough and irritating. Just overall pretty unremarkable, any bad start to the late game retros. Well, if it isn't my old friend, the boring ass desert level. Truth be told, I've gained a bit more of an appreciation for this one. I still don't like it at all, but after seeing how much worse it could have been, yeah, I'll take this any day over the stuff I ranked lower. This one is at least trying with its unique Mario Bros 3 theming, and tossing in some rarely seen enemies like the Pokies. Plus there are some neat shortcuts. That's about as nice as I'm gonna be to this track though. I still don't like desert levels, I still don't care for the music here, I still find it kind of uninteresting to race on, and I still think it was a terrible decision to bring it back straight away from Wii when that one already had a much better desert stage in its Nitro selection. It's not even that I think this is necessarily a bad track, I just inherently don't like desert courses. Between this and the remake I have pretty much no preference. The Angry Sun is easier to notice here, but the Wii version lets you do tricks on the bumpy hills. Both pretty minor differences for a track I don't care for either way. Little did I know before starting this that the C in C tier would stand for Circuit. SNES Mario Circuit 1 is more excusable as a Shell Cup course than putting Mario Circuit 3 in the next game's Lightning Cup, I guess. But this one also has a way simpler layout. There are some pipes as hazards, but this one isn't really anything to write home about. I have no real opinion on it one way or the other. SNES Donut Plains 1. You have no idea how heartbroken I was upon hearing the name Donut Plains for the first time, and finding out it was a grass track instead of being something themed around actual donuts. Though credit where it's due, despite the donut part of the name being very misleading, it delivers on the plain part exceptionally well. It is overwhelmingly okay with its layout and presentation. The bridge is a nice addition I suppose, and I like the cuts you can take with mushrooms. It's a basic SNES track, I don't know what you want from me. GBA Peach Circuit. If you had to pick one of the Super Circuit, well, circuits, why Peach Circuit? Could it not have at least been the one where it's raining so it at least has some unique element? Oh, they actually did include that one. Wait, so then what's the point of this one? Whatever, it's fine, it sure is a circuit. Not bad by any means, but I'm never gonna be stoked to race on it. And yeah, GBA Luigi Circuit is in pretty much the same boat. But at least the rain makes it a little more unique in presentation. The puddle hazards are alright, and I like how one of them is strategically placed behind an item box as a solid punish if you're not paying attention. Plus I like the Luigi blimp. Like I said before, I'm usually pretty lenient towards Nitro circuits in the context of being starting courses for newcomers, but most of that goodwill goes out for DS's Mario Circuit considering it's in the Star Cup. Not even the start of the Star Cup, it's track number 3 of 4 for some reason. Why is this what they followed up TikTok Clock with? You could swap it for any Flower Cup track and I'd probably rank this a tier above. Because even though it's pretty plain visually, it actually has a solid layout with a lot of turns, good shortcut potential, a few enemies acting as hazards, and a cool pipe tunnel. As a late game course though, it's very underwhelming, especially compared to the great lineup surrounding it in its cup. At the very least I can say this works better as a late game course than Figure 8 Circuit does as an early game one. N64 Moo Moo Farms has a mildly charming theme and decent music, and not much else going for it. There are Monty Moles to make you watch out when drifting on the inside of the road and a kind of cool bridge, but this is otherwise the embodiment of an okay Shell Cup course with a very plain layout. Props to it for being the only non-circuit track in its cup though, that's gotta count for something. I guess I kinda like it, but it's just an inferior Moo Moo Meadows as far as I'm concerned. From what I'm told about Double Dash, the DS version of GameCube Luigi Circuit had a few small shortcuts and alternate routes to the side taken out, and generally this is like Baby Park in the sense that it's not as good on the DS considering how much tamer this game is. Though it's not nearly to the same extent as Baby Park, because this at least isn't the most boring track ever devised when special items are taken out of the equation. I do like this one's unique layout for a circuit with how the middle of the track is squashed together and you loop around to the same area. Plus it has some boost pads which are enjoyable to drift on. It's still not anything too special. The off-road cuts you can take with a mushroom probably take longer than driving normally, and the chain chomp is so out of the way that it's kinda sad. But who knows, maybe if I ever do play Double Dash extensively, this will fulfill its role as the starting track well enough for me to bump it up a tier. I always found Yoshi Falls to be a little overhated. I think it's a fine enough little mushroom cup course that I can play and enjoy decently enough, and not much else. The scenery's pretty to look at, the risk reward element of the waterfalls is kinda neat, and it has a good amount of speed boosts. It's nothing crazy by any stretch of the imagination, and yeah, it was a poor choice to bring back in Wii despite giving it a few fun trick ramps. But I don't see it as one of the worst courses in the series or anything. It's a simple early game course and I am perfectly content with that. Congratulations Yoshi Falls, you get to be the king of mid in this game. A greater status than would be given to you by any other Mario Kart player. Okay, now we can get on to the ones I think are pretty good. It's almost poetic that a circuit is what closes out the entire track selection list. But I actually like GameCube Yoshi Circuit well enough. I mean, it's shaped like a Yoshi, what more could you want? Well, other than the shortcuts and Yoshi Copter that they removed from the Double Dash version. Okay, I think that's the checklist of all the obligatory talking points for this track over and done with. Overall, it's pretty solid, but kind of underwhelming as a final course with how barren it is, and it looks way less vibrant and lively than the original version. We all have that one track that's a consistent run killer, right? For me, of all things, it's GBA Bowser Castle 2. I lose on this one against the bots way more than any other in the game for some reason. This works for me a little better than the other GBA Bowser Castle in Wii. It's still a visually repetitive flat GBA course, but the way this one works with the boost pads and jumps over the lava pits of varying lengths are pretty fun actually. I like that you can't get over the longer ones without a mushroom. That's a good way to keep players on their toes and stop them from getting cocky with the jumps. So yeah, overall a good track that I enjoy. I've mentioned a few times that I haven't played Double Dash much before, but I really want to at some point considering what I've heard about the track selection there. I mean, if this is the neuter to all hell version of Mushroom Bridge, then the original must be something really special. I know this version removed several shortcuts and kinda missed the point, but in spite of that, I think this is a really fun traffic course. The cars aren't as varied on the GameCube or as plentiful as on the Wii, but they serve their purpose well as a tricky hazard. The scenery's pleasant, the one intact shortcut is nice, the music is great. It's still a good course, even if it's just a husk of its former self. For as unimpressive as most of these retro courses are, I gotta give props to the N64 ones for actually pulling their weight. Moo Moo Farms is whatever, but I actually quite like the other three. The weakest of them though is Choco Mountain. I like the visuals here aided by the fog. The rolling boulders on that cliffside are good hazards as well. I don't have much to say on this one. It's just pretty good and the long straightaways make this one of the best tracks to use the funny Bowser plane car on. Cheap Cheap Beach is the only acceptable sand track in the game. This fulfills its role as an early game track very well. It's not especially challenging, but it's got a good amount of turns and a couple hazards here and there. The Cheap Cheeps themselves are a little bit pitiful with how out of the way they are, but the crabs work well enough. It's got a very endearing theme with plenty of variety in the scenery and locations it takes you to considering how relatively short of a race it is. Between the beach itself, the jungle area after it, and the pier at the start which has this very satisfying jump. Also, while the music is pretty standard pleasant beach fare, I really like that one weird little noise that plays during it. Nice stuff all around, just not a standout. I really like Wario Stadium, though I feel it's probably the one held back the most by debuting too early in the series. I don't want to harp too much on the lack of tricks in this game, but yeah, all the jumps and such do feel a little incomplete without it. Still, this is pretty damn solid. Much like Waluigi Stadium from the games prior and after, it builds the atmosphere of a big sporting event very well with giant electronic signs in the crowd watching, and even a version of the track overview jingle that only plays on this course. The actual music for the track though, I mean, it's good for obvious reasons, but it does kinda just make me want to play on Waluigi Pinball instead. Oh well, I still like this one with all its fun boosts and jumps. It's not a favourite, but it's still very good. Shroom Ridge is the older, calmer brother of Moonview Highway. I don't adore this one nearly as much as I do with its successor, but I find this traffic course way more calming and it makes for such a pleasant experience. Fitting given that it's in the Flower Cup rather than the Special Cup. The grassy aesthetic isn't one I'd usually find very interesting, but this being like a regular country road you drive on normally does it a lot of favours for me. It's got good music, a nice windy layout, enough cars to keep you on your toes without going as hard on it as Moonview. This one's just a vibe, it's nice. Oh yeah, and obligatory Sir Musty reference.
Where are the cars?
I feel like N64 Banshee Boardwalk is one of those kinds of tracks more focused on building atmosphere rather than being super high octane and exciting. And it does that quite well, I'd say. The ominous music, booze that are floating around, dark backgrounds and that random giant fish all make this feel like one of the more unsettling tracks. A long way from topping 64's Bowser Castle, but for what it is, it does that job way better than stuff like the original Boo Lake and Ghost Valleys. Otherwise, it's a fun course, just not a super flashy one or anything. The big drop is cool and I like the abandoned building, but those bats are still pretty annoying. GBA Sky Garden is so much better than I expected. Obviously it's a flat GBA course, so it's not exactly a highlight of the franchise, but I think this is easily the best retro pulled from Super Circuit prior to 8. The cloudy theme with all the beanstalks make for something really visually distinct from everything else in the game, despite the best efforts of the multicolored blocks. And even though there's no verticality or anything, there are still plenty of turns and shortcut opportunities. Ones you have to be careful with or else you'll run the risk of flying straight off as you boost over the ramps. It baffles me that Super Circuit's retros were 80% Bowser's Castles and boring ass circuits for the longest time, because if the rest of them were this good, I honestly wouldn't have minded them. There are some like Cheeseland or Ribbon Road that I would have loved to have seen in Wii or 7. Luckily though, after the kind of raw deal that they'd been getting, 8 has been giving the GBA tracks special treatment by revamping them entirely. Prior to those though, I can confidently say that Sky Garden is my favourite, and overall it's one of the best retros in all of DS. Oh yeah, and the blimp from Luigi Circuit shows up here. Come on, how can you not love that? DK Pass walked so that DK Snowboard Cross could soar. This doesn't even come close to its successor, but I still got a lot out of it. It's a fun trek all the way up and down this mountain rather than exclusively focusing on the descent, so it's not like it's completely the same despite sharing a theme. This one also has snowmen and giant snowballs as hazards, which is pretty neat. And generally I think it's a nice looking snow level with a solid musical score that feels very different from the usual snow tracks. I can't help but feel the music would fit another track theme better though. Like, am I the only one who heard this song at first and was surprised it wasn't in a beach track or something like Peach Gardens? I don't know, that might just be me. The one thing that really stands out here though is this hill with the item box on it. Normally this would be a standard cool shortcut if you had a mushroom, but this one is unique as far as I'm aware in that it guarantees you a mushroom or star regardless of what place in the race you are. So if you have a mushroom already, it can be a good way to catch up, but if you're already way behind of everyone, then you're unlikely to have a mushroom in the first place to get all the way through the off-roads, especially with how easy it is to lose them in DS. So you'd likely have to sink a lot more time into getting it. That's a nice way to make it not completely broken. I wish other tracks did stuff like this where you could go out of your way for a guaranteed good item. Like, imagine if Peach Gardens had this on the Chain Chomp's path at the start, or Waluigi Pinball had one behind one of the bumpers, or hell, if Baby Park threw caution to the wind and gave the item boxes there a higher chance to spawn stuff like lightning, bullet bills and blue shells. That could have been cool and potentially saved the most boring track in the game. N64 Frappe Snowland is not what I expected to be my favourite retro in the game. I think I might just have a soft spot for Mario Kart 64 snow levels. I don't even know why, I haven't played that game yet. Much like Sherbertland on the Wii, this one admittedly doesn't have much to it. There are more turns here, but it's still a fairly simple course. But I don't know, I've always found winter to be one of the prettier seasons, and a clear dark blue sky with light snow is an aesthetic I can absolutely get behind. The snow sculptures in the background are a cute addition as well. I love the music here just like with Sherbertland, and the snowmen make for pretty good hazards which set it apart from the penguins in that other course. They're maybe a little too punishing if you hit them, but they're not too tough to avoid, so I feel that balances it out. The only part that kinda starts to lose me is near the end with the giant snowballs, which are cool at first, but become visually repetitive after not too long. Other than that, I surprisingly love this one. As someone who's never played Luigi's Mansion, I still love the track based around it. The name is a little misleading though, since you're barely in the titular mansion. You drive straight in, make a few 90-degree turns, and drive straight out. The majority of the track takes place in the Nightmare Garden outside, which is a little bit disappointing. Still, while they could have done more with the mansion theme, I love this one like I said. The windy entrance and the spiral down the inside of the mansion are really cool, as is the table forcing a brief split in the path. The mud area outside is handled significantly better than Choco Island 2, since they give you more brief patches of normal road to drive on at the cost of the path not being as optimal. I like that. I also like the creepy trees wandering around, and the music is fittingly slower to match the eerie tone of the Luigi's Mansion series. People who've played this game will probably get more out of this than I do, and that's cool. Like I said, I do still get a lot out of this one, it's just not quite one of my favourites. I'm so glad Delfino Square got to come right back in Wii. It's great in that game, and it's basically identical across both versions. I mean, the Wii version is slightly better for one very simple reason, but I think I've gotten that general point across by now. This track absolutely slaps regardless. Such a charming theme and lively atmosphere with incredibly cozy and fun music. It's pretty simple for the most part, but it does have a good amount of shortcuts and branching paths, so there's a lot to explore. Bonking can be a pain in the building section, sure, and maybe this isn't quite the most interesting thing you could have done with a sunshine themed location, but I don't care man, this course is so good and I love it to pieces. It's just on the cusp of A tier for me. I go back and forth forward on that a lot with this one. But there were some tracks that managed to quite solidly place in that tier. So let's go over them, shall we? Well, after a quick detour. I didn't cover Wii's battle modes, but I did recently refresh my memory on the DS one, and this is probably one of the better battle modes in terms of freedom with a rule set. You can change the amount of total wins or games in a session unlike in 7, you can toggle teams unlike in Wii, and you can have fun with a control scheme that isn't annoying unlike in Tour. I like the last man standing format as well. The stages on the other hand, they're fine. Not as good as in Wii or 7, but that's a good thing since it means they only continue to improve from there. Ironically, compared to the racetracks, which are made of a great Nitro selection and a subpar Retro selection, the Retros are actually the highlight here for me compared to the Nitros, which are just kind of alright. So let's quickly rank all of those, shall we? Number 6, Palm Shore. It has a neat gimmick and concept with the changing tides, but I found it more annoying to trudge through than anything, and the rest of it doesn't give me much else to enjoy. It doesn't even give the full benefit of a cool tropical theme, because the backgrounds are pretty barren and the single battle mode music track doesn't fit here, which I guess applies to the other Nitros too, but oh well. Number 5, Nintendo DS. The novelty of racing on the console itself is pretty cool actually, enough to make up for how otherwise barren it is. It has verticality with the top screen, and I like that there are parts you can't go up through, but overall this one's just kind of okay. I wish they did more with the display screen itself, but I understand the console probably couldn't handle that. Number 4, Tart Top. Nice theming with a cool centerpiece to jump over, and other globs of strawberry cream that are satisfying to drive into and bounce off. It ultimately ends up feeling like a beta version of Chain Chomp Wheel, but overall I like it. Number 3, Twilight House. The best choice to bring back immediately for Wii. I love weaving in and out of the various rooms, and the simplistic presentation works. Not sure if it would have been better or worse to make the middle room accessible, but it's a good stage either way. Number 2, N64 Block Fort. This is a nice precursor to Block City and Block Plaza. It's a fun 3-tiered stage with plenty of walls to bounce items off, turns to use to make your getaway, and floors to climb off that you can jump off and ambush people from below. It's great. Number 1, GameCube Pipe Plaza. I really love this one. It's already solid with the ramps and the second floor above the standard square arena, but it's the pipes that teleport you between the floors that really make this one. Not much else to say, it's a banger. Okay, back to what you actually clicked on the video to see now. I adore the DS Rainbow Roads. It's not quite top 3 in the game like I initially expected. It doesn't really stand on the same pedestal as Wii or 7's version of the track, and even some other versions of Rainbow Road that I haven't played recently or ever look more interesting. This one in comparison is a bit standard with not as much to really set itself apart, but a standard Rainbow Road is still pretty excellent in its own right. It's one of the more difficult tracks in the game and it never feels unfair in that. It's got plenty of tricky turns, including this cool spiral at the start with all the boost pads, and the one standout aspect to this iteration is the pair of anti-gravity loops, clearly foreshadowing that mechanic in 8. The visuals are also gorgeous and the music is pretty, which is to be expected for a Rainbow Roads. But again, it's far from my favourite in either of those aspects. Overall though, a more than fulfilling end to the Nitro courses. Previously mentioned tracks are going to play into people's nostalgia for Mario Sunshine and Luigi's Mansion, but the game I'm nostalgic for that they lean into is Super Mario 64. I love TikTok Clock Man. Such a fun callback to another great game with a lot of creativity and variety. The pendulum swinging makes for a neat moving hazard you have to watch ahead for and time your positioning, and I love the use of gears at multiple points that can increase or decrease your speed. The first set is something you have to position yourself correctly for, and the second set comes at the very end of a lap and is completely optional, but can provide you one last burst of speed if you can aim for the right gear and not fall off. This is the closest we're going to get to the Mushroom Bridge shortcut unless it comes back in 8 Deluxe. The remix of the 64 level music made me happy as well. Between this and Throwback Galaxy, I think I just love 64 callbacks. The DS Bowser's Castle stands tall as one of my favourite Bowser's Castles in the series. It's not quite as crazy as some of the later ones, but it's still amazing in its own right. Lots of sharp turns, thwomps and fire hazards are standard affair for this series staple, but this entry also has a branching path depending on whether you want to fight the conveyor belt or take a longer route, this cool spiral, and a bunch of shifting platforms. There's a lot of great stuff in here. Not especially standout in the grand scheme of the series, but still pretty fun. Then the developers threw this hellish contraption in, and that shot it up in the rankings considerably. I love this twisty cylindrical platform and how it changes directions constantly. You need to pay attention to where it's going and keep your balance, all while praying you don't get hit by an item. Because dropping off of this doesn't get Lakitu to send you back to the start of it, instead it forces you to take the walk of shame down a longer path, while everyone who stayed on gets ahead of you. That is evil and I love it. Once again, I'm ecstatic that Peach Garden's got priority to be brought straight back for the next game because it's amazing. This one is so pleasant. Pretty much every good thing I said about Delfino Square is amplified exemplified here. The garden theme is so charming, the music is lovely, there's an even greater amount of alternate paths and shortcuts to explore with mushrooms. It's just so solid. The use of chain chomps is probably my favourite of any track I've seen feature them. Not just with the ones with risky item boxes, but even the one at the start that you have to swerve around depending on when it is you arrive there. There is a lot more going on throughout this course than you'd initially expect from its cutesy presentation. Despite a lack of real difficulty, it absolutely earns its place as part of the Special Cup, a mainstay of the series, and the absolute peak of this tier for DS's lineup. For a while I was torn between A tier and S tier for Airship Fortress, mainly because of the spiral at the end. I thought it didn't give enough room after the cannon to position yourself, so it was kind of way more favourable to cars with better drifting stats. That applies to a lot of stuff in Mario Kart, but this time around the way it felt like it would force bonking and staying in the outside lane just wasn't very fun to me. Then I time trialed it a few times and found the counterplay, so I guess I just needed to get good. Other than that, you know exactly why this track is so beloved to the point of being a fan favourite. The music and atmosphere feel just as oppressive and sinister as a Bowser's Castle track, but it still manages to feel very different from them. Rather than taking place in a castle, this one feels like an adventure as you infiltrate a ship during one of Bowser's assaults, dodging banzai bells and rocky wrenches as you board the deck, taking sharp turns into the brig where you dodge these fire streams, then you yourself become the projectile that gets shot out of the ship's cannon into this damaged building. That's so cool and creative. Then you have the spiral like I mentioned before, which has grown on me a lot. It's a great end to an exhilarating race. It stands as one of my favourite courses in the series, and its reputation is absolutely deserved. Please bring it back in 8 Deluxe, Nintendo. In what world does Mario Circuit deserve priority over this? But yeah, we all know what number 1 is. I'm not really shocked that Waluigi Pinball managed to take the top spot. If anything, I'm more surprised that Airship Fortress managed to give it some solid competition. This is far from the most complex course out there with no major shortcuts or anything like that. All things considered, it's pretty linear. I mean, you can go around and behind the bumpers instead of straight past them, but also why would you ever do that? No, this track isn't considered one of the best in Mario Kart history because you have to put particularly much thought into the route you're going to take to win. It's as beloved as it is because it's just that fun and atmospheric. I always had a fascination with arcades and pinball machines growing up, so it's no wonder this track works as well as it does for me on a conceptual level alone, but it's also down to how creatively it uses its theme. Having the giant pinballs pose as obstacles you have to avoid going down the track, then having to dodge around them in the bumpers in the actual pinball machine section at the end is so cool. The bulk of the course has plenty of twists and turns to keep you engaged all the way through, coupled with unique sound effects for the item roulette and booster pads to make it even more unique and immersive. They even have a special sound effect when you go past the bumpers as if you yourself were a pinball that just fell out of the bottom of the game. That's such a nice touch that they didn't need to add but did anyway. It's got some top tier presentation as well with all the bright neon colours and one of the best musical themes in all of Mario Kart. This course draws me in from the second it shows the cool tunnel at the start, and my attention never wavers for the rest of the round. I understand if you consider this course overrated or whatever, think what you want, but for me, I can't go against my gut on this one. I think the creativity of the theme alone cements Waluigi Pinball as one of my favourite Mario Kart courses, and ever since I first played it, it's been my favourite course in Mario Kart DS. Between that and Coconut Mall being some of my favourites before I even knew what YouTube was, maybe young me had some alright taste in courses actually. Which is better between the two though? Well, I'll leave that up for when I cover Mario Kart 7. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed playing through this game again and writing about it. I had a blast going back to it after so long, and I was happy to see that it still held up as well as I remembered it. It did spawn Desert Hills though, which might just invalidate every good thing it has going for it.